Have you been avoiding conflict lately? Are you afraid that if you speak your truth to someone, you might damage the relationship permanently? Is inner conflict eating you up inside? Maybe you're thinking one thing, but doing another, and you just can't seem to get your head and heart to line up. As humans, we all deal with conflict. Join Jennifer McKenna now as she talks to business leaders about the importance of conflict and how we can all move through it with greater grace and ease, ultimately taking our relationships and our lives to the next level by facing conflict courageously.
Welcome to the show, everyone. Today we are speaking to Dorothy Leone-Glasser, who is the Executive Director of Advocates for Responsible Care. We are going to cover a big, wide range of topics related to patient advocacy because we talk about conflict on this show, but the point of it is to help inspire and motivate listeners to move through their own conflict or to take action to move through the conflict in their communities. The common theme of every show is cultural conflicts. We have lots of cultural conflicts going on right now, as we all know, as we all experience and feel them every day when we read the headlines. And lately we've got some really taxing headlines. Tense inducing, you know? So our divisiveness is growing, unfortunately, and we have a show where we're having conversations every week to try to bring us together. So as we do that, let's welcome Dorothy to the show. Hey, Dorothy.
Hi. Thank you so much for asking me to be on today.
Absolutely. Dorothy has an incredible history that I cannot wait to share with everyone. I know it spans everywhere from being a nurse to a therapist to a patient advocate, but most importantly, it started with your own chronic illness. And I would love for you to share with our audience your background. Why are you so passionate about patients not getting the appropriate care? Where did all this start for you?
Oh, God. Okay, so the quickest version that I have for your listening audience is at the age, because this could just go on into volumes. At the age of 19, I became very seriously ill with systemic lupus erythematosus. And I was in for a very rough ride of experimental treatments, devastating chemo, and having everything I knew about my life being turned upside down and inside out. I had an unusual case because it was so severe right from the start with heart attack, seizures, of course, joint pain, immobility, and rashes, and a stroke, and afterwards being more susceptible to certain cancers because of it. So it was a life-threatening disease for me, and I was told that my lifespan would be ridiculously cut short from this. And my attitude at the time was, I didn't understand that. I thought I could barely spell this disease, never mind pronounce it, and they're telling me I'm going to die from it. It didn't make any sense to me. I was in nursing school at the time, so I did all my research, and I realized that because at that time we didn't know that much about lupus, but that I had to start taking some action for myself. This was not going to be a situation like the cold or the flu. You go to the doctor and you say what's wrong, and they tell you what's wrong, and they give you 4 medications, and you go home. And eventually, within 2 to 3 weeks, you're back to who you were before. I knew that was not going to be the case with this. So I realized the best way I can continue to live, and to somehow manage the symptoms of this disease was for me to become my own advocate, to be sure that I was getting the treatments that I needed, and more so that the progression of the disease would not be taking over my life. I didn't want to be lupus. I wanted it to just be a characteristic of who I was, and hopefully I'd learn something from it. And boy, did I learn a lot from it. So that's where this all started, with me being my own healthcare advocate. And as I completed my nursing degree in a wheelchair and on crutches, I realized that there were so many people out there going through what I went through. What did I have to offer them, not just in terms of the medical care of their illnesses and their life-changing events, but more so, what did I have to offer them about the stuff that's not written in books, the stuff that no one tells you, which is how do I live courageously with something that has taken over my life and changed my life forever. So it was through that understanding for myself that I thought I needed to start sharing this with patients. So ergo, 40 some odd years later as a nurse specialist, I've always been a patient advocate for my patients and have expanded that into helping patients all across Georgia.
Boy, have you ever. And, you know, as the mother of 2 teenagers, I think, gosh, when all this started for you, and by the way, I love how you just rattle off what happened to you and you put rash in the same sentence with heart attack and stroke with the same tone of voice. Because as a mother, I can imagine that was just catastrophic, not just for you, but for the family unit. I can't imagine happening.
Yeah, I was so
to one of my
fortunate
children.
that I come from a very long line of courageous women, just courageous people who never let something like illness stop them. They didn't ignore it. They just found out, what are we going to do about this? And I also lived with an extended family. So for me, I had a lot of people of support around me, which I know made the difference in terms of not only controlling more of my illness, but also allowing me to continue on a career path. Although it started late for me as compared to a person who's healthy, it never stopped. It was just a harder road to get there. So for me, I think, you know, finding your courage in the middle of conflict resolution, as you talk about all the time, finding that courage in the middle of challenges and conflict is the most critical thing you could do. And you're going to need mentors along the way, and you're going to need people who have been through the struggle to help you with yours, and then other people who just knowledge about this and others who just want to be there for support. So having an army of volunteers that support you is critical, and it makes the difference in terms of the outcome of your health and your wellness and your life.
Right. And we're going to talk a lot about patient advocacy in this show, but all of what you said really holds true for anyone going through a major conflict. And I know in today's world, we would be hard pressed to find someone who isn't. So,
right.
You know, so I ask listeners, even if you don't have chronic illness, to really heed Dorothy's advice throughout the show, because you've lived conflict on multiple levels with this. You start
right.
with your own chronic illness, which was a lifetime sentence, by the way. You know, like you said, it didn't go away in 2-3 weeks, but it wasn't going to go away at all. It was effectively going to have to be managed to the best of your ability. So you have that, and then we're going to get into your career in a minute, which is just nothing short of amazing when you think about all of what you've done and the conflicts that you've helped others move through. And then also, you know, in the advocacy process, the conflicts that you have to push through just working with legislators. So I'd love to cover all that ground if we can in the show with some of your stories and great wisdom. So let's start with your career, shall we? How did you move from nurse to, you know, patient advocate? What happened there? I know a particular story. I'd love for you to tell the audience through your own lens.
Oh, well, you know, what was so important to me is just understanding the process. We used to call this psychoneuroimmunology. And for me, if I held on to, and it doesn't matter if it's illness, whatever your conflict is, whatever your challenge is, plug it in. Okay, it could be, unfortunately, a divorce. It could be the death of a child. It could be taking care of sick parents. It could be losing a job that you love. It could be anything at all, any loss, any challenge that you have. Mine happens to have been life-threatening illness. But I realize that illness, we keep it alive in our minds. And then it plays out in our body, which gives us all the symptoms of being sick, whether it's anxiety or whether it's a physical illness. But it comes to a place of peace and rest in our spirit. And that's really where wellness survives. It survives in our spirit. So making your spirit as strong as possible is the way to conquer any kind of life challenge, any kind of conflict in your life. Because knowing who you are at the core of who you are will always give you the strength to overcome anything that comes your way, any barriers, any blocks in the road. So as I was going along teaching people these concepts, I received a call, and I think this is what you want me to tell, is this story, from physicians who work at Grady Hospital. And they had a conflict. They had a real problem that they were going to close a dialysis center. And this is their outpatient dialysis center. Most of the people who went to that center were uninsured, many immigrants. So there was no insurance available. And they knew that because these patients had end-stage renal disease, that if they did not receive scheduled dialysis, they would die within 2 weeks. And they asked if there was anything I could do to help advocate on behalf of these patients. And, of course, as time went on, at first I hung up the phone and thought, are you crazy? You can't do this. And then I realized that I had to do it because there was no one else who could do this. So my focus remained on advocating for access to treatments that these patients need to save their lives. And I realized one of the biggest problems in all of this was that there was a tremendous amount of cultural incompetency and health disparities in our systems that we were going to have to slam through in order to make this happen. So my whole concept in working with the patients was to let them know that we are all going to speak as one voice to empower a change in this whole process of them not being less than human beings and being told that they can't have the treatment that they need to live. And that's how I really started thinking about, once I took that on, which was an enormous thing to do, that I needed to become a 501c3 nonprofit patient advocacy organization in order to help people become their own advocates for whatever it is in their life that is either an injustice or that is a tremendous challenge to them, and something that always looks, as you say, darkest before the dawn. So what I wanted to help people was take them through that dark space to bring them out into the sunshine, back to the dawn where there was some hope. And I believe that this is possible no matter what the challenge is. I think the trick is, how do you do it? And how do you do it is by, as I said, getting as many people as possible to at least listen to what the problems are and to then buy into a plan. And, you know, your first attempt at the plan might not work, but you just don't give up. It's the perseverance that brings the positive outcomes. So that's how I started doing all of this. And we did have success. We had a 3-year battle of securing permanent care for these patients. This plight and conflict went across the globe. We got press in foreign countries, Belgium, Canada, all over, for our work in trying to give a voice to people that didn't have a voice.
Yeah, it was an incredible experience. I, remember getting the call from you about what you were doing, and next thing I know, I'm downtown picketing and.
Yeah, next thing you know, you're at a press conference there supporting me. But I want your audience to know that was because you have always been a supreme strategist. And part of my success is always realizing where my boundaries are accepting what I'm good at, but then knowing the right people to bring in for all the other pieces. And you were the first person I thought of that you could help me strategize this for it to be successful. And it was all in the nuance of all the stakeholders being at the table and understanding what each stakeholder wanted from us. That was so helpful that you gave me for us to be able to continue this fight for over 3 years and battling a major hospital, battling providers like we had to, and just getting the buy-in of the community, because everything that's going to be successful is going to have to start in your community. You can't possibly do this without thinking of all the stakeholders at the table. And I'm a big believer in go local first and then branch out from there, because a healthy community is most critical to all of our elected officials, to all our businesses, to all the people who function within that community. So you were very, very pivotal in us being able to keep to the strategy that we decided on no matter what and just keep moving forward.
Well, I thank you for that. I will tell you that I've done a lot of conflict work over the years. I've done a lot of strategy work and coaching and facilitation and consulting in multiple arenas around conflict and helping people push through it and get to the other side and have huge victories for themselves and their businesses. However, this situation was the first time I had experienced something that felt just blatantly immoral. You know, oftentimes I'm hired by people who are in conflict because they want to do better. They want to be better. They want to move through the conflict. This was an entirely different situation. I'm glad that the principles that I use worked. I'm glad that you had an incredible amount of knowledge and know-how to move so many people through this very important crisis. But the truth be told, it was very sobering for me to be on the front line with professionals who were perceivably making an economic decision at the expense of dozens of lives. They had hired one of the big gun consulting firms to come in and help to make the hospital more, what would you say, profitable? More efficient. I don't know what term they would use, of course, right? They're not here to defend themselves. But it was supposed to be the public, the hospital where you go. It has lots of funding, lots of nonprofit and government funding to ensure that it's local a safety net hospital, right? Right. And so I guess we've got to go to commercial.
We're going to take a break.
We are going to take a break, but we are going to revisit this topic when we return, so stay tuned.
Connecting you with the best of the conscious minds in the world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
OMTimes magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. Connect at OMTimes.com. OMTimes, creating a more conscious lifestyle.
I'm Kathy Williams, host of Sexy Mom Abundant Life radio show on Thursdays at 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. On the show, we explore living abundantly in every area of your life. Ways to let go of limiting patterns and beliefs and to step into the flow of creativity and possibility. knowing you are supported by the universe.
Opiates has taken everything and everyone I've ever loved away from me. Everything.
I blew my ankle out and I got prescribed pain pills by my doctor.
If making my detox public is going to help somebody, I'm all for it. I just wish I would have had a warning.
Opioid dependence can happen after just 5 days. Know the truth, spread the truth. A message from Truth, the Ad Council, and ONDCP.
Welcome back. We're talking to Dorothy Leone-Glasser, who is the founder and executive director of Advocates for Responsible Care. And we were talking about a huge event that actually was the catalyst to creating your organization. This has been many years ago, by the way. Yeah. But Dorothy, in my opinion, was wearing, the Superwoman cape and going in and saving dozens of lives through this situation. And I'll tell you, the interesting thing for me is at the time, the other thing that I did not know anything about was end-stage renal disease. Now, interestingly, just this last Thanksgiving, my father died. Now, he's had multiple health issues over the years, but he ended up with end-stage renal disease, and his pain from other issues in his body became so high, and it could not be managed, and it had been sustained for so long that he chose to die, and the way he chose to die was you just take him off dialysis. This is just what happens. And so I was there to hold his hand through his death. But it for those who don't know about end-stage renal disease, if a hospital closes its dialysis center without giving those patients who are dependent upon it an adequate solution within a week, it would cost their lives. Some may linger longer than that and have just be violently ill until they do die. But this isn't something you mess around with. So if you're going to make your hospital more efficient or profitable, it's probably not where you should start. But that's just my opinion.
That's how we're thinking about it. And I have to say, in fairness to Grady, and we all wouldn't be here without Grady. It is our only safety net hospital, so I applaud them completely. The staff is great, the service is great, but it was getting around that cultural concept of you are here to preserve the life of human beings. Your doctors all take an oath, do no harm. You are purposely going to be killing these people if we don't provide a bridge of care. And in our Georgia code, for nurses, for doctors, if you let go of a patient, you have to be able to provide a bridge of care for that patient so that their health care is not interrupted. And this was really hard to work through, as you know, that as I said, disparity and cultural barrier of people understanding that we're forgetting what our focus is here. Yes, you need money to survive as a hospital, but you also have to preserve the life of your patients. And all of these people were not ER patients. They had been under Grady's care for more than 3 years. So there was a responsibility that in their desperation of trying to stay above water, that was slipping away. And I think it was just our job to come back and say, hey, let's not forget why we're here. We're here to save lives. We're here to find a way, no matter what someone looks like, no matter what their background, no matter anything else about them, the end result is if this person's going to die without us intervening, it's our job to intervene. And as a nurse, I take my oath very seriously about that. So it's all about that personal story, no matter what the conflict is. Get your personal story down. If you're going through a challenge right now, write out that story, because it is within that story that you will find your power, that you will find your ability to advocate for yourself, and then you'll find other people who feel like you do, who are going through what you go through, who maybe have been there already, that can help you move forward, because we feel so stuck when we're in the middle of that because no one honors the fact that all of our stories are very important. And you must honor the person's story just like you honor their journey through life. So I think that's the most important thing is write down your story, because it will help you see where your barriers and where the stumbling blocks are, and it'll allow you to go beyond yourself, to reach out. Who are the other stakeholders in me getting through this? And calling everybody in and saying, I need help with this. I need to be able to get through this.
Yeah, absolutely. I could not agree with you more. And I do want to back up for a second, because those who have not ever worked with me, I would like to share that when I go into a corporate environment of any sort, I intend fully, and that is very clear from the get-go. And if it hasn't been to any client, I ask you to call me out, because it is the place from which I operate, which is the multiple win, right? I'm not here to have one group win and another group lose. I'm not here to ask you to save a group and lose your profit, because no business can sustain itself if it's not profitable. So that's never on the table. That is not on the table. And so when I walk into a situation like this and they're making a financial decision at the expense of multiple lives, there's clearly some middle ground here that we need to strike, right? That the opportunity. Right. So to your point, we have these cultural differences, and those were layered, I would say, and I want your opinion on this, because the first thing was understanding their goal. If they want to be profitable, we're not asking them to swing the pendulum all the way and go bankrupt. We're just asking that in the interim of redesigning their plans for the hospital, that they don't inadvertently let people die.
Exactly.
Right?
You don't want the blood on their hands.
I just wanted to be clear that was right. Right. We want to do it in a moral way and do the due diligence of that oath, which is why the doctors were the ones that called you when the administration was making these decisions. Now, I want to add, though, that there was another cultural barrier, in my opinion, from where I was sitting, because these particular patients were immigrants. And it felt, right, I want to hear what you have to say to this, but from where I was sitting in that situation, it certainly felt like they were being treated as expendable. They were, because they weren't, you know, dare I say.
It was taking their humanness away. Right.
It was totally taking the humanness away.
Yes.
And what I felt very strongly.
Yes. What was so important to me was to change their message. And you know all about this, because this is what you do when you enter a company. My job was, okay, I just put this out to the media press. I ran it on the AP. I ran it across the world that this was happening to these people. And fortunately, I got a great response. We had the New York Times come in, Wall Street Journal. Everybody came in from everywhere. I was on the Voice of China. I do not speak Chinese in any dialect. But, you know, what was so important is that the message going out because of your actions, and this could be applied to any situation, was that you didn't care about human life. If you could work with me, if we could bring all the stakeholders to the table, we could change that message that says, as you are improving your health care system for this hospital, you made sure that you cared about human life because you didn't throw these people to the curb. You did not erase them from your roster. You made sure that they were still taken care of. I will help you bring out that message to people instead of the message that you don't value human life. And that was my pitch to them, to the board of directors at the time, was we could change this narrative that could work good for you and will work well for the patients. And that's always what the goal is. Like you said, you want the business to prosper, but you can't do it at the expense of the people, whether it be your employees, whether it be the people you serve. It doesn't matter. Politics works that way. Business works that way. Most of life, organized life, works that way. So it was important for me to have the message clear as to you can either go with this message that in the end is not going to help you prosper financially, because a lot of people are going to look at you and say, well, you don't really care about people. Why do I want to go there? On the other hand, if we change this to a positive message about what you're doing to help patients, how you listen to the needs of patients, wow, what a great message that'll be for you, and people will want to come to you.
Right.
So that was my biggest,
so
yes.
Yeah, that takes me back to something that I fundamentally believe and have worked with hundreds of clients on over the years, which is most people have been wired around a win-lose belief system.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody has to lose, right? And that's what causes the justification to feel normal and right, even when it is way off the moral radar. And so I ask listeners, when applying some of these principles to your personal lives or to whatever conflict you're dealing with, check in with yourself and ask yourself, if in your conflict right now, was there any point of origin, was there anything within you that was operating unconsciously from the belief that if I win, you lose, if you lose, or if you win, I lose, and therefore it's a self-sabotaging, self-fulfilling prophecy before any relationship really even evolves.
Right.
I find this all the time.
Yes, and my whole, with advocacy in general, it has to be a win-win. Bring the stakeholders to the table, and how do you get something good for you out of it? How does the other party get something good? Most importantly, though, it's understanding that for that to happen, everybody's going to have to compromise a little bit. It's part of our politics today. We're in a terrible strained position. It's because everyone has forgotten the fact, hey, I give a little, you give a little, and we make something good happen here.
And
that's the philosophy. Yes, and we win more. And that's the philosophy when I head to the Gold Dome in Georgia. That is always what I'm thinking of before I enter there, is it doesn't matter what your political persuasion is. It matters who's going to benefit from this. I want you to benefit. I want the person to benefit. And I want us to understand that for that to happen, there's going to have to be some compromise. But the fact that we, in the end, have a win, that's newsworthy in itself, is that we have a win because everybody then is taken care of. And isn't that our job? Isn't that Congress's job? Isn't that the job of our General Assembly? And I feel very empowered that citizens need to be able to be part of that process. So if you don't know how our laws work, if you don't know how we do things, start local. Find out about it, because that is the only way then that you participate in it. And you can be a big part of the win. Having this idea of my voice matters, but I have to be knowledgeable. I have to be sophisticated about that knowledge, and I have to be willing to understand what all the parties need. Everyone won't get everything they need. It's like a marriage. It's like raising children. You don't always get what you want, but you do learn that everybody can find a place of understanding amongst them. And that is the piece that we've lost in our healthcare system, and we've lost in our laws of this country in general. We've lost that whole understanding of we have to be able to understand how we get to a place that everybody gets something. Instead of this feeling of inequality and exclusivity, we need to become more inclusive. So we're fighting now a new paradigm that's out there when I say this, and I know that. But I feel if we have an army of people who will think this way, who will have their actions motivated by this concept, I think we can change what's going on right now.
Right. I believe that. I believe that. So everyone adopt the understanding that we must seek the mutual benefit. We must seek the win-win.
Yeah.
If we don't seek it, we will certainly never find it. Okay, so before we lose too much time, I want to make sure the listeners know the end and the outcome of the story that we've been sharing, because I want to also move the conversation to today, the conflicts that you move through, the victories you're doing at the Capitol in Georgia today, trying to continue all these years later to still provide access to medications and care for patients who just can't get there because of prohibitive policies and laws and all kinds of things. So you continue to do great work. But I do want to circle back around. Tell us the outcome, because I do know you ended up having to take power of attorney over how many people?
Yeah. At the time, I think it was 37 patients. So what happened is I had to come in and be the healthcare directive for 37 patients, so that no one would direct these patients to do something that wasn't for the benefit of their health. Because we had other parties coming in and saying, sign this and we'll be able to send you somewhere to get health care, and I knew that wasn't going to happen. So what I did was become director of health care for these 37 patients at the time, and I had a better negotiating position because of that, because really the only reason why I was sitting at the table was for the welfare of all these patients sitting behind me. So fortunately, we have a wonderful board member, Judge Lindsay Jones, who helped us to do all the legal things that we had to do, and most importantly, to identify all the stakeholders. And we went local first to our commissioners. We went to the people that we knew who cared about our communities, because these patients come from every community in Georgia, all as north as Beaufort, as south as Columbus. So we were able to really engage everyone. We engaged businesses, we engaged providers, and that is the concept that I take with me. And the patients got a contract, and some were taken in kind, because all people who actually make money in Georgia, who are healthcare organizations or who provide for healthcare, always have an in-kind list, and we persuaded them to put some of the patients in kind. And we were able to give these patients ongoing, continued dialysis treatment until this day. Many of our patients have died because you cannot live long from this disease. Other things have to be done other than just the dialysis, but because they're not insured, those are not options for these patients. So we do the best that we can, and we are a family, and that's how we take care of things. So as I became really aware of more of the disparity, we had to go on and look at other issues as well.
Yes, and we'll talk about those other issues when we return.
Free your mind with OMTimes Radio, IOM FM. Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of OMTimes Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of OMTimes. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community.
Hello, I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, host of OMTimes Magazine's flagship radio show, What is Going On? My passion is sifting through information, research, and innovations from new thought teachers, speakers, and researchers pushing back the boundaries of what we know about life, energy, metaphysics, and the universe. I love shifting perceptions about who we are, why we're here, and how quickly impossible becomes normal when we open our minds, expand our awareness, and accept that the only limits that exist are those we place upon ourselves. So if you're the kind of forward-thinking, eager investigator of what lies beyond the current reality that most perceive, Why not make a date to come play with me in the field of possibilities at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time every Thursday, and together we can discover what's really going on.
Imagine being fired because of who you love. Imagine being denied medical treatment because of who you marry. Imagine being evicted because of who you are. Millions of Americans don't have to imagine this. They have to live it. Because in 31 states, it's legal to discriminate against LGBT people. Get the facts at beyondido.org. Brought to you by the Gill Foundation and the Ad Council.
Welcome back, everyone. We're talking to Dorothy Leone-Glasser, who's the founder and executive director of Advocates for Responsible Care. I do want to kind of bring that full circle. You took power of attorney over 37 patients. I think it was well over 100 that were using the dialysis center. Many have either moved back to their home country, but many have passed away, unfortunately, sadly. And I just say that because I want to make sure that we keep the humanity always at the forefront of our minds, right? Every one of those numbers represents somebody's mother, father, brother, sister, spouse, daughter. These are real people and friend, all of it. And it's just so imperative that we really do strive for that win-win. We want to be profitable. We want to have prosperous businesses and communities, and we want to prosper individually. And it's the only way we can get there collectively. And we can't do it from a space of self-serving, one-dimensional thinking, as you say, the old paradigm. So let's move to some issues that are affecting probably hundreds or thousands of patients. Access to medication here in the state of Georgia. I know this as an issue. Access to good health care is an issue nationally, but it varies in states on the type of insurance plans you have access to and what that allows for you. I know here in Georgia it's hard for entrepreneurs, which is interesting because here we are boasting that we've got, all of this great innovation going on and all these great startups, and we don't provide any adequate healthcare insurance to all these people, but hey, go Georgia.
Well, one of the problems is that, health is now being decided by big conglomerates, insurance companies, pharmacy benefit managers, big pharma, hospital associations, special interest lobbyists, everybody except the patient, the caregivers and supporters. So what we need to do to really make healthcare better in every state, and most particularly here, we need to refocus onto the patient, onto the caregivers, onto the supporters, and onto the providers and our physicians. What's most important is keeping that doctor-patient relationship healthy, and we can't do that if people who are not involved and have not taken the oath to take care of patients are the ones making those critical decisions. With that being said, I believe that as we become larger as patient advocates, and we've proven this, that we can have a say in our own health care and get what we need because our legislators are willing to listen. And they will stand up for the patients. We have to show up. We have to tell them our stories, and we have to tell them why this is important to us. So I think that, it's again a situation of empowerment. It's getting the facts, and it's not listening to people who are not telling you the truth. We have social media plays a big role in what we think is a fact or a myth, and we have to learn to distinguish that. So we have to be looking at where's your source of information? Who are you going to about this issue? And is it a medically trusted source? And what part of doing this work and why I thought we'd be more successful is ARxC decided to organize a coalition. We have a 36-member coalition of patient advocacy groups and providers, physician providers on this coalition so that when we go under the dome to ensure patient protections, to be able to ensure affordable access to not only prescription drugs, but also to treatments that patients need, we're going to be heard because we're so many people in one voice. And that is the way that we were able to get Biosimilar, which are new cutting-edge drugs that many people with chronic life-threatening diseases must be able to have affordable access to, and recently step therapy protocols, changing that, reforming step therapy so patients don't have to fail on a drug because their insurance company says, I won't pay for that, when the doctor already knows that they absolutely must have that drug for them to be able to live any quality of life and to be able to get some control over the disease process. So those are the things that we've been fighting for here under the dome, and it's only having one loud voice that allows us to be standing there and be represented, just like the special interest lobbyist is standing there next to us, and they want to be heard. If we have enough people standing with us, we will be heard.
Right, and I have witnessed this myself, and I going back to what I said about entrepreneurs, I only say that because I'm surrounded by them. As a female entrepreneur, I have a lot of colleagues who have faced this issue too, where when each year the insurance options change, and this past year it was a matter of, well, I guess we'll just lose all of our practitioners because we have to now move into these other plans that, theoretically you lose all your medical history unless you can go to every practitioner you've had, gather all your files, bring everybody up to speed, which we know nobody really is going to take the time to do. But that's not the real issue. That's so benign compared to some of the issues you're talking about, where we have thousands of people whose lives and quality of lives because of chronic and in some cases terminal illnesses cannot access life-altering, life-changing care, whether that's medication or protocols or whatever, because the insurance policies prohibit the doctor from actually prescribing what the doctor knows that particular patient needs. And that's what step therapy is. It is, there are extra steps there that the doctor has to prescribe or take to prove first that it's not going to work for the patient before the insurance company will allow for what the doctor knows to be the adequate or appropriate solution. And oftentimes it comes at the cost of either you've lost months of time trying to prove that and the quality of life has deteriorated, or the expense is prohibitive, right?
Right.
So those are the kind of issues that are truly catastrophic.
Right. So for insurance companies to really prosper, which is a very hard concept for them to understand, I firmly believe, and many nurses, ask nurses when you don't know something, because, the nurses know. They work with the patients every day. They're there in the front lines every single day. They're the least quoted by the press and media, but they know the most. So, it's so important for the insurance industry to understand, if you want good health outcomes so that you are paying less in coverage, give the patient what they need to be as healthy as possible instead of putting up barriers that restrict them from receiving the medications and care that they really need. Hospitals come on board because they realize if you don't have access to the treatments and to the prescription drugs that you need, you're going to wind up in the ER, which is going to cost the hospital so much more money, and it's going to cost the insurance company more money. It's all about, again, changing that mindset as to the message. If the message is healthier outcomes, then let's devise a formula that gives patients healthier outcomes. And it's always going to be open up access. It's always going to be that. And right now, access is so restricted, and I feel because of so many chefs in the kitchen. There is so many with insurance, with pharmacy benefit managers, with drug manufacturers. There's too many people who want to decide the outcome. That should be left from the treatment plan that the doctor devises. Because believe it or not, insurance companies don't practice medicine. Physicians practice medicine. And that's what we have to get back to. The focus of the patient, what the patient needs, what the doctor is allowed to do legally under his license, under the oath that he or she took, and being able to get that right to the patient so that the health outcomes for everybody will be better. You can't have a healthy nation. Despite all the buzz that you are hearing, that's misinformation. You can't have a healthy nation if you don't have a healthy community, if you don't have a healthy state. And the only way you do that is by putting the focus on the patient first. And I'm talking about from children, from little tykes right up to seniors, that we take on issues that affect everybody. Everybody. And I think that's what's so important, is getting that message across, that if you really want to do well, you have to switch your focus. Because your bottom line's going to be so much better if you just listen to what the medical community is telling you that patients need, and listening to the patients, because they always know what they need better than anybody. It's changing that whole perspective. Yeah.
Yep, and you've touched on another, what I call conflict-inducing belief, which is this short-sighted thinking when it comes to, again, finances, economics, profitability, right? It's short-sighted thinking. I see this a lot in public companies too. They want to make sure that, they have a good quarter instead of making sure that they have long-term sustainability. And so I think that's the trap that insurance companies fall in as well, right? They want the short-term, what's the short-term cost-cutting decision as opposed to what are our long-term costs? And so So before we wrap up the show, I want listeners to know you've had a huge victory recently by getting a bill passed. And to your point, I want to say that the legislator who sponsored it was a nurse by trade before she became
absolutely
a state congresswoman. So there you go, validating your point once again. But before we wrap, what would be, the takeaway that you've given our listeners so many great points of wisdom and tips, by the way, throughout the conversation. I appreciate that. What would be your takeaway? You got to that victory. What's the big takeaway you can give to other people to do for themselves that worked for you and your group in the recent passing of this bill?
I think the biggest thing is understanding that your relationships are most important. The sponsor of our bill, as you said, Representative Sharon Cooper, has hung in with us for 3 years. We now have a relationship with her. And it is developing that relationship that is as important as the issue itself. Understanding if it's health care, learn about your health care system and how it works. Everyone who's listening needs to learn about how we make laws in this country and in this state. That's going to help you tremendously understand about who the stakeholders are and what the win is for everybody. Connect yourself to organizations that not only think like you, but are also fighting the battles, the same ones that you're fighting, that are important to you. Don't forget your community leaders, your local health officials, your elected officials, everything right down to the commissioner. The people who are in charge of your neighborhoods are very, very committed to making sure that you're okay. They want to be elected. We pay their salaries. Connect on an issue that you are passionate about. Send emails. Phone calls are best. Attend local meetings and town halls that center on issues that are important to you. And I think most importantly is resist fear and that misinformation that is all fear-based, because you have the power to make a change. Coming together, we absolutely make a change, and individually, we make a difference in people's lives. So take that power and organize and come together so that your voice is being heard And you can really help shift this paradigm back to our values and what is important for all of us, so that everybody not only has a win, but that we can be as healthy as absolutely possible.
Beautifully said. And I want to add to that if we all channeled our anger and disappointment into proactivity, taking action toward the solutions, it's time to all of us adopt solutions-based thinking. And when we do that on top of a new belief that believes that a win-win is possible, right? If we start with that belief, we add a solutions-based thinking, right? Let's stop focusing on the problem. Let's stop feeling victimized by the headlines we're reading and by, in this case, dictates from our insurance companies. Let's stop feeling like victims, because that comes from that fear space that you're talking about, and channel it into the courage and action, true action. And you've given everyone such great advice, Dorothy. I appreciate it so much. It has been such a pleasure.
Thank you.
Being by your side through many things over the years, but you remain one of my true heroes.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, and thank your audience for listening.
Absolutely. So I'll see everyone next week.
Bye.